home for the holidays. Well, we begin with all eyes on Congress right now as they continue talks about a $900 billion relief bill, and everybody wondering about stimulus checks. That bill includes $600 checks for Americans, $300 in weekly federal unemployment benefits for the next 2.5 months, and funding for rental and nutritional assistance and for vaccines. Senator Mitch McConnell says while the legislation doesn't have everything each side wants, it will help people during a time of great need.
The Senate is about to cast some incredibly impactful votes. None of us think any of this legislation is perfect, but a big bipartisan majority of us recognize the incredible amount of good it will do when we send it to the president's desk.
The Treasury Secretary says millions of Americans could begin to see stimulus payments as soon as next week, with Congress expected to pass the bill today. Our Sydney Heiberger explains how this bill will help people struggling to make ends meet.
Well, the bill offers 11 more weeks of benefits for people enrolled in the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program and the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. People receiving unemployment benefits can expect a $300 weekly check, plus an additional $100 for some self-employed and gig workers. The bill also says people making up to $75,000 a year will get a $600 stimulus check, $1,200 for couples making up to $150,000 a year. You'll also get an extra $600 for each dependent. National unemployment rates have been on a steady decline for months, but Augusta University professor Dr. Dustin Abbott-Holt says that number doesn't paint the full picture. And he says the need for government assistance is just as important as it was before.
So the way that the unemployment rate is calculated is the proportion of people looking for work relative to those in the labor market. It doesn't capture especially workers who had given up, people who had given up trying to find work because it was so difficult to find work during that period.
Unemployment trends in Georgia and South Carolina went back on the rise last month, but Dr. Abbott-Holt thinks that could be attributed to people re-entering the workforce after months of not looking. The big question now, though, is when will people start to see those checks? And we're going to look into it tonight on News 12 at 6 o'clock. In Augusta, Sydney Heiberger on your side.
And both Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines are rolling out across the country as the pandemic continues. Health officials are concerned cases will surge as travel increases ahead of the holidays. You'll hear from them here on News 12 first at 5. But first, taking a look out over downtown
forecast.
Today, President-elect Joe Biden received his first dose of the Pfizer vaccine. The shot was given in public at a hospital in Delaware. This comes 1 week after frontline workers got the first doses of the vaccine. His wife, Jill, also received the vaccine. And this comes as hospitals around the country receive their first shipments of a second COVID vaccine today, this one made by the drug company Moderna. But as Elise Preston explains, the fight against COVID-19 is far from over, with the U.S. reporting another 2,600 Americans died of the virus Sunday.
Moderna's vaccine for COVID-19 arrived this afternoon at Hartford Hospital in Connecticut, and vaccinations began almost immediately on frontline healthcare workers. Nearly 6 million doses of the newly approved vaccine are on their way to 3,400 destinations across the country. Federal officials say between Moderna and Pfizer, tens of millions of doses should be available in a few weeks.
We think that by the end of January, we would have had the capacity for 50 million individuals to have been vaccinated with the first dose.
So far, more than 500,000 Americans, mostly hospital workers and some nursing home patients, have received the first of 2 Pfizer doses. Now, the CDC is looking at what groups of Americans will be next in line.
A CDC advisory panel voted in favor of people 75 and older and essential workers, including teachers, first responders, and grocery store workers. The CDC is also advising Americans to stay home this holiday season, but the TSA says more than 3 million people have traveled in recent days.
Code 591 emergency.
Passengers on a flight from Orlando to LA may have been exposed to COVID-19 after a passenger fell ill. New video obtained by TMZ shows passengers performed CPR in the aisle. The man later died at the hospital. United says all customers on that flight acknowledged they had not been diagnosed with COVID-19 in the last 14 days and did not have any symptoms. But a Good Samaritan says the man's wife told him otherwise.
She told me he was short of breath, and she just wanted to get him home.
United says it's working with the CDC to determine if anyone was exposed to coronavirus. Elise Preston, CBS News, New York.
A new strain of COVID found in both South Africa and the UK. The World Health Organization says it is more infectious, but there's no evidence that it is more deadly. Health experts say containing it is important so it does not spread. And because of that new strain, countries around the world are closing their borders. 2 travelers from the UK just this morning, an airport near Berlin had long lines of people formed at ticket counters just hours after Germany imposed travel restrictions for flights arriving from Britain. Officials have not said how long the flight ban will last, but as you can imagine, not everyone's too happy.
I think it's a little bit annoying. Yeah, I think I'll be able to come back, but I'll be traveling in a month or 2, so it's not acute.
I mean, I'm German, and here everybody is even more precautious. We just don't know what's going to happen. Of course, in a way, I think we are exaggerating, but I don't want to say something else because we don't know what happens. So better to be precautious for sure.
France, Italy, the Netherlands, Canada, and India are among other countries who announced restrictions on UK travel. First at 5, Attorney General William Barr says he has no reason to appoint a special counsel. This is in regard to President Trump's claims of crime in the U.S. The family of the teen accused of killing 2 people during protests in Kenosha is raising money for his legal defense. They're doing this by selling merchandise for Kyle Rittenhouse branded with the slogan Free Kyle. Kimberly Motley, who represents one of the victims who survived the shooting, says the products are in bad taste.
They're going to be celebrating Christmas without their loved ones. Meanwhile, Kyle Rittenhouse's mom is trying to profit off of these tragedies. And so it's just extremely disgusting.
According to the website, more than $20,000 has already been raised. Rittenhouse faces life in prison if convicted of first-degree intentional homicide. He's expected to return to court in January. The statue of General Robert E. Lee removed overnight from the U.S. Capitol. Each state is entitled to display 2 statues in Statuary Hall. Lee's statue stood for more than 100 years alongside Virginia's other contribution of President George Washington. A statue of Barbara Johns is expected to replace Lee's statue. 16-year-old Johns protested for poor conditions in the 1950s at her all-black high school in the town of Farmville. If approved, Johns would be the only teenager represented in the collection. If you're looking forward to putting 2020 in the rearview mirror, and who is not, this is a promising sign. A giant illuminated 2021 sign has arrived at New York City's Times Square, which means the new year is almost here. At midnight on New Year's Eve, it will replace this year's sign high above the city. The ball drop and live entertainment are still on for this year, but instead of 1 million or so people packed into Times Square, there's only going to be about 40 invited guests, all healthcare or frontline workers. You can watch the celebration on TV and from a new app called NYE 2021. 2 large companies fighting over your privacy, and it's up to you to decide if you'll share your information with them. We'll explain.
And we are expecting some warmer weather.
Just into the newsroom, we're getting a first look at Mario Bernardo Romero Gonzalez, the suspect in a deadly stabbing. Columbia County deputies arrested him around 2 o'clock today. He is charged with murder, accused of stabbing 31-year-old Christina Gavea to death at her home last night on Milledgeville Road in Augusta. Also new this evening, a person we just told you about who went missing has been found. 60-year-old Mike Jones was last seen Wednesday in Waynesboro and was also located there today. So he is safe, and we are glad that he has been located. 2 of the largest companies in the world are fighting over your information. Now users are caught in the middle, and it all has to do with your privacy. Jamie Tucker explains.
This all has to do with what data these apps collect and then what they do with it. The latest iOS update, iOS 14, will show you details about your privacy and any of the apps that you download. You'll find it in the App Store by scrolling to the bottom of the description of the app and then look for app privacy. And we're going to take a look at the policy for Instagram, for example. It collects your contact info, identifiers, other data, and then it tracks it across apps and websites of other companies. Now, Facebook gathers even more. Go to the Facebook app in the App Store and you'll see a longer list of data that's collected and shared. But who is getting all of that information? Now, Facebook earns about 98% of its revenue through advertising, and it's easier to sell ads on Facebook to a business if that business knows it is reaching a potential customer. For example, if you're on the internet one night looking at fishing poles, Facebook can sell ads to a retailer knowing that their ads are going to reach potential customers, someone interested in fishing poles, and they can charge a lot more for those advertisements. Apple's revenue comes mainly from selling devices and has made a big push toward protecting the privacy of people using those devices. But Facebook took out an ad claiming Apple's motive is profit, not privacy, forcing businesses to charge for subscriptions, which Apple will get a percentage of. Apple is not going to back down. Facebook says if a large number of its users opt out, it's going to hurt small businesses because they will not be able to reach their targeted customers. That's What the Tech. I'm Jamie Tucker.
Now, Apple's new privacy window is only available when you update to iOS 14. It affects more than just Facebook apps, but any app in the App Store. Taking a look outside, the first night of the winter solstice, Riley, and there's something pretty cool up there.
It is. We are hitting a bunch of milestones out there.
Well, you know what these are, whether you use them, receive them, GIFs. We love them. Google is unveiling the top 5 of 2020 today. The company says more people than ever before created GIFs to express themselves. Everything from remembering a legend like Kobe Bryant to Tiger King, who can forget that, Mean Girls to birthdays in quarantine, and the most 2020 experience of all, panic buying toilet paper. That has to be the best one of 2020 right there. There they go, hoarding it all. Every winter, millions of Americans struggle with seasonal affective disorder, also known as SAD. But this year, in the midst of a global pandemic, mental health advocates worry seasonal depression could take a harsher toll. Naomi Ruckham explains the risks and how to deal with it.
Gabrielle Starr was diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder in her late teens.
When I didn't have to go to class in college, I was just like in my bed. I wasn't working out. Like I would eat at really weird hours. I wasn't sleeping well.
Her symptoms of depression escalate as the season starts to change.
The first month, literally, of daylight savings ending over, my body is totally out of whack.
Doctors are concerned with the pandemic already impacting mental health. Seasonal affective disorder could mean an even darker winter than usual for many. Dr. Craig Sawchuk is a clinical psychologist at Mayo Clinic.
It makes it easier to forge through difficult times when you have a reliable light at the end of the tunnel. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, that light keeps getting pushed further back.
Add unemployment or a sick family member to the mix, and that could make even more people vulnerable to seasonal depression.
You may have folks operating at a little bit more of a deficit, heading into this time of year because of social distancing and really doing the right things from a public health standpoint, but they may already be in more of an isolation kind of mode.
Experts say staying active can help, maintaining a healthy diet, treating with therapy and medication, and finding a good source of light, getting outside, or investing in a special lamp. Gabrielle takes vitamin D, meditates, and practices yoga.
It makes a huge difference in my day. It's sometimes really hard to force myself to do it, but I always feel better.
She also uses an alarm clock that mimics the rising sun. Naomi Ruckham, CBS News, New York.
Well, we were finally able to hit the 60s today here.